Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about the King Vegeta stuff coming out in set 13. This archetype, just right off the bat, is looking really weird, but I actually find it pretty cool. There's actually some things about it that I think could actually be kind of good, maybe at a rogue level. I'm not quite sold on it being like super highly competitive yet, but it's definitely very different, and I think it's kind of interesting. So we'll talk about it in today's video. If you guys are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell to miss video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description to do so, particularly today. If you want to buy or pre-order any of the cards you see in today's video, use my link in the description to TCG Player. That being said, let's get started. Alright, so we'll start off with the leader. We got the unawakened side. When this card's placed in your leader area, activate one Young Invaders from your deck. That's the field card for the deck. We'll read that in just a second. When this card attacks, look at the top 5, add a mono red sand card with energy cost of 5 or less among them to your hand, then shuffle your deck. That energy restriction of being 5 or less is actually pretty relevant. It actually stops you from searching the SS4 Broly STR, which is actually playable in the deck. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The Awaken, when you or your opponent's life's at 4 or less, draw one card, untap an energy, take life until you have 5 left, and flip over. So kind of like that Future Trunks Awaken, the blue leader from set 10, depending on you or your opponent's life, which is kind of interesting. Then we have the Awakened side of King Vegeta, permanent, reduce the combo cost of all red sand cards with 500 power in your hand by 1. So the 500 power thing, I'm pretty sure, is brand new to the game. I don't think besides the cards in this archetype, there are any cards with 500 power. Even the Bulma cards have 1,000 power. That's pretty funny. They're stronger than the little baby sands we'll see in a bit. Auto, when this card attacks, draw 1, and then auto once per turn. When the power of one of your opponent's cards is decreased, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and gets minus 10,000 power for the turn. This is actually very similar to Nappa from Battle Evolution. He kind of triggers the same way, except when one of your sidemen's KO'd, minus 10 something. This guy, though, similar trigger, which is pretty cool. Let's read the field card that you start and play with the leader. Auto, if your leader card's King Vegeta BR. At the start of your opponent's turn, play up to 1 red sand with 500 power from your deck to your opponent's battle area. And if you played a card, you can't play battle cards that aren't red sand cards for the turn. So this is almost similar to the starter deck King Vegeta leader we got, in the sense that you are very restricted to playing certain cards. But, you know, the leader doesn't say you can't include non-sand cards, whatever the case is, but you can only play red sands when you use the ability of Young Invaders. And I guess you don't have to use it every single turn. We'll see as we go through the cards in the deck. I don't think you'll be activating this auto every single turn, and it does seem to be optional. Because it says up to 1, and if you played a card, then you can't play red sands. So maybe cards like Yamcha Counterplay can still be viable in the deck, but maybe you might just want to play all sands just for the consistency of it. But I guess we'll see when we start building the deck and messing around with it. Activate main once per turn, add up to 1 card from life to hand, then play up to 1 red sand card of 500 power from your deck in rest mode with its skills negated for the game. Then shuffle your deck. So that seems like it plays it to your field if you ever need it to, and there are instances where you might need that. We'll talk about that later. Activate main once per turn, pay a red, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, gets minus 5,000 power for the turn. Kind of like a Planet M2, but it does cost additional energy and it's not activate battle, but still nice to have it. I mean, extra effects are never a bad thing. If you don't end up using them, it is what it is, I suppose. But anyways, let's go on and see some of the battle cards in the deck with 500 power. So we've got a Goku, a Vegeta, and a Broly. So the Goku, very simple, when this card's played, switch it to rest mode. I'm not exactly sure why they made this card this way. The Vegeta and the Broly are very different. We'll see that in just a second, but I think maybe it allows you to play cards that say, like, when you KO an opponent's battle card, do X, right? Because if you attack this thing with even a 10k battle card or a 5k battle card, that's going to demand your opponent to at least lose 1 card if it's a 5k. But we know most effects that say when your opponent's battle cards KO, do X, they're usually like 15k, 20k. When those things are attacking this, you're going to resolve those cards for the most part. So that's kind of neat. That could be a reason why they did this. Again, the Vegeta and Broly very different though. Let's give them a read. Vegeta's got unique when this card's played if your life is at 5 or more. And keep in mind, reading this, you want to read it from your opponent's perspective because you're giving them this card, right? So again, when your life's at 5 or less, if your opponent's card is a leader card's of King Vegeta BR, place 1 card from life in your drop, then draw 1. So it's not really like you're critting them a life, because you are critting them a life, and that's what the card says, but they're also drawing a card. So it's basically like you're doing a burn damage to them. They still get a card out of it. It's just like whatever the card was in their life is burned, and now they get to draw the card to replace it. Pretty weird, but the auto's not too bad. Once per turn, one of your cards is attacked, choose that card and gets minus 5,000 power for the turn for the battle. So that auto is going to hinder your opponent, and we saw the leader, when a card's decreased, it decreases by another 10k. So that actually gives you some kind of interesting removal depending on what you're attacking at, because the card has to be chosen for the minus 5. It's not like an optional effect, which is pretty cool. Then we've got the Broly. When this card's played, if you life 5 or more, and your opponent's leader cards are Red King Vegeta BR, place 1 card from life drop, then draw 1. It's the same thing as the Vegeta. Let's read the second auto. Once per turn, when you play a battle card on your turn, choose 1 card in your hand and send it to its owner's warp. At the end of the turn, return the card sent to the warp by the skill to the owner's hand. So that's kind of interesting. They're kind of emulating the Red Broly swap deck, like the similar type of, temporarily losing cards from hand. I think the Young Invader Vegeta is much better. He's probably, in my opinion, the best out of these three. The Broly with temporary hand warp, I'm not really too crazy about it, and it is a once per turn auto. It'd actually be kind of cool, maybe a little bit degenerate, but it'd be kind of cool if it said, like, every single time you play a battle card, like, warp a card from hand, and sure, get it back at the end of the turn. I actually think that'd be a pretty cool deterrent from all these like super crazy spam decks. That'd actually be a pretty cool thing in my opinion. Again, maybe it's too powerful. They are one cost 5k combos, so they are tough to get off your field if you're playing against the King Vegeta deck. The Goku is 5k, but again, he comes in rest mode, so can't exactly be comboed off right away. So these cards make the deck very interesting. You want to give them to your opponent, basically make them suffer. Let's see some of the more cards for the archetype. We've got Goku to the next level, Vegeta to the next level, and Broly Unchained Might. So they all share an activate main. You may choose one of your opponent's red Raditz BR or Goku. In the case of Vegeta, you choose a Vegeta. In the case of the Broly, you choose a Broly. And you place them at the bottom of the owner's deck, and then when you do, you play the corresponding cards to your hand. Now, keep in mind, they all say choose a Raditz BR, right? We haven't seen a Raditz BR at 500 power. It's assumed that that's going to be coming in the tournament pack. We'll have to wait and see what that does. But, I mean, if it's any past track record with tournament packs, that Raditz is probably going to be pretty good, and Young Invaders should be able to give it to your opponent. So we'll see what that card ends up doing. But anyways, the Goku is a blocker, auto once per turn at the end of your turn, or when this card activates its blocker skill, switch this card to active mode. The Vegeta is unique critical. When this card's played, look at top 5 cards of your deck, add up to 1 red sand with energy cost of 5 or less, or 1 red unison specified cost of 1, then shuffle your deck. And the Broly says, if you have 2 or more energy in all of your opponent's energies in rest mode, when this card's played, your opponent reveals their hand, you choose up to 1 battle card with 15,000 power or less from it and send it to the owner's warp. At the end of your opponent's next turn, return the card sent to the warp by this skill. So again, that temporary hand rip, I don't think it's amazing when you're not doing it consistently, right? Like Red Broly swap, they just do it battle card after battle card after battle card, and their 6 drop, they take a ton of cards away, and you're being super fast. This deck doesn't really seem like it's being super fast, so a temporary hand rip is going to be much worse in a deck like this, right? So I don't really think you're going to pay too much attention to the Broly chain of this deck. I'm actually very intrigued by the Vegeta chain, and we'll see that more as we go into the next few cards, but I like the Vegeta a lot already. He's a 1-drop critical, essentially. He searches you, adds you another card. I also like what he evolves into, which we'll see in just a second. We've got Goku at full power, Vegeta full power, Broly Brawn amplified. Okay, let's start reading them. So they all seem to evolve for 3 over their corresponding character, and they all also seem to draw a card. They all have deflect. Goku's got blocker, Vegeta's got double strike, and Broly has barrier. Permanent, this card can't be played from any area with non-evolved skills. They also all share that. Let's start reading their other independent autos. So we got Goku once per turn. If your leader card's a red sand card, when this card KOs one of your opponent's battle cards with an original energy cost of 2 or more, or is removed from your battle area by an opponent's skill, deal 1 damage to the opponent. So we just talked about how giving your opponent that Kid Goku could trigger an effect like this, but it says original energy cost of 2 or more. So that's already like anti-synergy. Not too in love with that. The Vegeta says auto if this card's in rest mode when one of your opponent's battle cards is played or attacked. You may choose that card and gets minus 10,000 power for the turn. And then auto when this card's removed from battle area by an opponent's skill, place 1 card from opponent's life in their drop area. This intrigues me much more. It's almost got that like 6-drop baby ape from like set 3 or 4 or whatever it is. It's got that type of effect where like your opponent gets punished for playing or attacking with cards. And then if they remove this, which is not the hardest thing to do, it's a 5-drop without barrier, but if they do, they crit a life. So they really have to contemplate like if it's worth to remove this guy. A lot of times they probably will, especially if they're above 4 life, but if they're like at 4 life or less or 3 life or less, that's actually a really big deal for them to remove this, which I like a lot. Let's read the Broly, right? So auto once per turn. If this card's in rest mode, when your opponent attacks a leader card, they reveal their hand, then choose up to 1 card from it, send it to their warp. At the end of the turn, return the card sent to the warp by this skill to the owner's hand, right? So again, that Broly with temporary hand rip, I'm not really feeling it too much because you're not being super fast, and they get the cards back actually really quickly. Like they get it back the same turn you remove it, as opposed to Broly swap, which takes them away for at least like almost 2 turns depending on when you play the Broly, right? You can play Broly on their turn depending on what happens, or you're most likely going to play Broly's on your turn, so those cards will be gone during your turn and their next turn. This card doesn't quite operate the same way. They get this card, they get the card back going back into your next turn. Now all these things kind of remind me of Deadly Defenders because they all seem to have effects that like, require them to be in rest mode, except for the Goku, I guess. But the Vegeta out of this bunch definitely intrigues me the most. I think if you want to build King Vegeta, maybe focus it around SSB Vegeta at full power. That's what I'm thinking at the moment. But anyways, let's move on. So what's really cool about this archetype, right, is that you're playing all these Gokus and Vegetas that share the same power level, whether it's the 500 ones, the 19k ones, or the 25k ones. That gives you the ability to play Gogeta Fusion of the Gods. You just fuse right into it, board wipe, draw 2, all that good stuff. There are a few problems with playing this in the deck, though. Your leader on the Awakened side attacks, looks top 5, adds a 5-drop or less red sand, so it can't add your Gogeta Technique Unchained. And the other problem that this deck actually shares with the set 11 Gogeta deck is that your unawakened leader cannot naturally draw into Strategies of Universe 7. It's honestly a feels bad in both the Gogeta leader and this King Vegeta leader. If you look at that top 5 or top 7 in the case of Gogeta, you see Strategies of U7 and you really need it, you can't add it to your hand. Like, that's just a really big feels bad. Yes, you know, to be fair, if you're playing a leader that just randomly drew cards, odds are you're not going to draw strategies just compared to everything else in your deck. You're probably going to play 2 to 3 copies of strategies. It's very possible you won't draw into it, but at least like with those leaders, you have that chance. With these leaders, they can't even grab it if you see it. And the main problem with King Vegeta is he can't even search your 6-drop Gogeta Technique Unchained. So yes, while this is a strategy you can go for in the deck, I think it's going to be pretty meta dependent. Like if that board wipe just destroys every deck in the format, yeah, probably play Gogeta Fusion of the Gods. But I really don't think in this meta that's really going to serve that purpose. Like I could see Gogeta Fusion of the Gods being good against King Piccolo, but even then you're not really removing their drums. So that could be a little bit lackluster. And like other decks in the format, just like thinking about Dark Broly, the -15 everything doesn't really do too much. And Dark Broly actually poses one of the biggest problems to a deck like this that plays this Gogeta engine, because they remove your boss monster, which you invested 3 energy in. They remove it for 0 energy. That's a really bad trade, right? And again, you can't naturally draw into Strategy of U7, so could be a slight problem, but it's just an option you have for the deck. Maybe it'll work. I know people like their Gogeta Bulma, obviously set 11 Gogeta. This is another strategy where you can play this Gogeta Fusion Chain. Anyways, this is the Unison meant for the deck. Black Mass Sand, Brawler from the Dimension. We did read him in yesterday's video, but we'll give him another quick read. Once per turn, when your opponent adds a card from light to hand or replaces a card from the life in the drop, add a marker to this card, gets plus 5,000 power for the turn. So we talked about this in Bardock yesterday, but in this deck, this is actually much better because he can gain markers on both players' turns, right? Like at the start of your opponent's turn, you give them the, Vegeta Young Invader, made them crit a life. This guy gains a marker, then come back to your turn. If he does a damage, he gains another marker. Plus 0 when your opponent plays a battle card. Your opponent may choose that card and he gets minus 5,000 power for the turn. If they don't, add 2 markers to this card. So again, another way to boost markers. And the -4, he has finishing power, gets plus 15k and double strike for the turn. So I do actually think this Unison's pretty good for the deck, mostly for the fact that you can actually gain markers during your opponent's turn by giving them the Young Invaders. I think that's pretty cool. And then just wrapping it up with some more utility stuff. King Vegeta Hidden Ambitions, counter. If your leader card and energy are all mono red and your opponent has 3 or more energy, negate the counter skill of an extra card with an original energy cost of 1 that was activated without paying its energy cost, then play this card. Okay, so red gets a counter. It is so like mind-blowingly specific, but it's actually really good. So particularly what this stops is, that's currently meta relevant, is free Dormant Potential Unleashed if they choose to use it, without paying energy because I have a Unison in play. Or like Sparking Dimension Magic against like Blue Baby or any other random blue deck you might play against. Obviously it hits any Sparking negate, but Dimension Magic is probably the most popular one. Also it's Power Burst too, which is actually pretty good. But yes, this is very good. Also as an activate main for a red, if your leader card's a red sand card and you place this card in the owner's drop area, play up to 1 mono red Vegeta's Lineage card with energy costs of 3 and 10,000 power or less from your deck, and shuffle your deck. So we'll have to go back and look at what specific Vegeta's Lineage cards this can play. I'm assuming it plays something from Evo Booster, but I'd have to again double check. But keep in mind, like this and the Vegeta, the Young Vegeta and the 5-drop Vegeta and the 3-drop Vegeta, I believe they're all Vegeta's Lineage. So there could be something coming out in the future that's meant to kind of support all of that. We'll have to kind of wait and see. Then we've got 2 extra cards. King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, counter attack if your leader's a mono red sand card. You may choose the attacking card, ignoring barrier, gets minus 10,000 power for the turn, so kind of like a Wolfang Fist. Your opponent can't attack with cards for the turn unless they give the attacking card minus 5,000 power for the turn each time. You can't activate copies of this card from your hand for the turn. Then permanent, if your life is at 3 or less, you can activate this card's counter skill from your hand without paying its energy cost by choosing 1 card in your hand and discarding it. Interesting stuff here. So you have the potential to use it for free. You can almost turn your opponent's turn off if they really don't want to lose the battle card they initially swung with. But it's a little bit weird because like you have to choose the attacking battle card, right? So if they attack with like anything they don't care about first and you use this, they'll probably just keep on attacking, which I don't know. This card to me is pretty weird. I don't know how I feel about it. I guess it'd have to be contextually, positioned to the meta, and we'll have to see if that's relevant anyway. But I almost don't think it is. But we'll have to kind of wait and see how that works out. Then we've got a Sudden Escape, counter attack. If your leader's a red sand card and get the attack, play up to 1 red sand card with energy cost of 1 and 500 power from your deck with its skills negated for the game. then shuffle your deck. So putting these into your own board with the skills negated basically just allows you to swap into those 3-drop Goku, Broly, and Vegeta that we saw just a couple slides ago. And activate main if later cards a red sand only card. Play up to 1 red sand card with energy cost of 1 and 500 power from your deck to your opponent's battle area. Shuffle your deck and draw 1. Cool that it cycles through your deck with a draw, but I mean, this essentially serves the same purpose as the field card, so I really don't think you need to play this card in any regard, but it could be good for the deck. But anyways, guys, that's all we have for today's video. This archetype is very, very strange. I am actually pretty interested in it, though. I do want in the comments below what you think about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.